What drives Jon Jones? I've heard lots of Jon interviews, lots of Jon question and answers. I've just never heard him ask that one. And I know that he would answer it. I just haven't heard anybody ask him it. What drives him? And it's hard to relate to, right? I sit over and give opinions on Jon all the time, but the other side of it is it's hard to do. There's not 10 people walking this planet that have athletically had the success of Jon Jones. I mean, you could very easily argue that success and achievement wise, that Jon Jones has done what LeBron has done. Very easily. Could argue that he's done what Simone has done, what Jordan Burroughs has done, what Tiger has done. You could make those arguments. He is that level of success. And it goes back 15 years, right? I mean, he's even got a lineage. So it's really hard to imagine what drives a guy. Now, money's a great motivator. You're a prize fighter. All right. We've got money. Put that in one column. What else? Right? Because the other guys get money too. So it's a bit of a wash. Even if that's a good, solid driver, you still don't have an edge on anybody. So you talk about achievement. And that was a hard one for Jon. Right? That was a hard one. That's why he left 205 pounds. I know what he's told people. I left so I could fight Francis. I left to challenge myself. He had goals at 205 pounds. He wanted to be the champion. And then he wanted to defend the belt the most, which was currently done by Tito. And Jon wanted to catch, I want to say it was 6, but he wanted to catch and beat Tito. And that drove him. That was a big deal to him. Whether we understand it or not, right? I mean, the greats, there's a fine line of genius in understanding what drives the greats. He wanted to beat Tito. And he did. Well, now what do you want to do? And he had to ask himself that question. Why am I here? What is this about? How do I gain? And he started to have a hard time answering the question. So he went to heavyweight. Now it's a whole new, or at least it felt new. I can't relate. I don't know. I want to be world champion my whole life. Never got there. Can't imagine if I was that I would give that thing back. I mean, I wanted to know. I did anything to get to it. I can't imagine just handing it back. And then when he handed it back to try to win the same thing. I mean, that was where the irony came. He gave a world title back as the first step in a journey in pursuit to win a world title. But for him, it was different because it was at a different weight class. Okay. So, but see, now we're starting to understand Jon. And you can't just understand him. It's a level of success that so few have reached. You could only imagine, what would I do in that spot? All right. He wins the heavyweight title. It's over. He's done. That's a wrap. There is nothing else to do. And that's according to him. I've been listening to his interviews. That's it. There's nothing. Well, no, he was able to make a shift. And the shift was now about legacy. Okay. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. You will hear guys talk about legacy. You will hear Jon Jones talk about legacy. If you ever then said to him, define it, you'd hear a mumbling fool. He didn't have the foggiest idea what legacy means. Well, it's how you're remembered. What? Well, it's when people remember. It's how they talk about you in 20 years from now. All right, you're getting a little bit closer. Keep going. I only bring that to you. Legacy is a weird one, and it's a hard one to define, but there is a definition. And for colloquial terms, it is, how will you be discussed by future generations? When you're done, when you're out of the sport, when you're too old to even go into the practice room, how will people remember and talk about that's your legacy? So he's fighting for legacy. I get that. And one of the first things that he will need to do is to become the heavyweight GOAT. And how do you do that? I remember Jon at 205 pounds who was clearly better than Tito, but Jon would say Tito's the best. Why? Jon, what? How'd you get to that conclusion? Well, he defended this 6 times. I've defended it 3. Tito's the best ever. He believed that. Okay. But if we take that and we put it at heavyweight, then we're not there. Even though I'm not sure there's ever been a heavyweight that could deal with Jon Jones. And I think that you would agree. Right now, he could walk out the door and never come back. We might, 25 years from now, still be talking about he was the greatest heavyweight of all time. We might. But if there's people that follow the theory that Jon does, which is you got to do something and then you got to do it again and again, does beating Stipe get you there? And it's a rhetorical question. Of course, the answer is no. So, how do you become the GOAT? How do you have that legacy? If that's what you're fighting for and you're willing to commit, you're willing to sacrifice, you're willing to walk out with your shirt off, you're willing to put your life on hold, be in the gym to pursue this one thing, it would be very reasonable that we could define and explain what that is. And we can't. I will tell you, if Jon fights and beats Sergi, it is game over. They're not a hater out there. Oh, and by the way, you want the asterisk to this statement? Jon whipped Sergi's ass. Whip him. Jon wouldn't lose a round. And I bring that to you because it's so important, because who is the GOAT? Who is the greatest ever? The answer is George St. Pierre. Why? But there's an answer to that. And a lot of it had to do with luck. A lot of it had to do with the matches that he was able to get. George St. Pierre proved to be better than all those who came before him. That's what defeating Matt Hughes represented. He showed that he could beat yesteryear. He then beat everybody of his day to the point that he had to go through them a second time. Could not have been clearer. It is beyond dispute by a reasonable person that George was not the best in the world during his time. But then when he left, guys that he had already beat came in and made their run. That's what Johnny Hendricks was about. When George left the sport, a guy that George had already beat represented the next era. So George was able to cover 3 eras. Now, there's some, luck's not the right word, but it's a word I think of right now. With just getting those matches, I admit that. There's been some other terrific and great fighters that just didn't have the same opportunity. Maybe if they did have it, they would have also had the same success. I understand that, but that's not how this game is played. Right? Once it's done, it's done. We have to look at the body of work. It's the rules to legacy. And I do believe that Sergi is going to grab that title and run with it when Jon gets out of the way. And many of you believe that Sergi could grab the belt right now and get through Jon. I do not agree with you. And I do not agree at all with the idea that Jon is going to retire after Stipe. Jon, somewhere in his little mind, got the idea that will help pay-per-view sales to go and work this. It's my last fight story. It's not true. Oh, by the way, you guys want another piece of inside information? When they couldn't get the Stipe fight, they floated the idea of Sergi Pavlich to Jon Jones, assuming that just wasn't going to be agreed. Jon said yes. That's something that isn't very well known. Jon agreed to fight Sergi Pavlich. So that whole thing, I got to tell you that. I know there's some real Sergi lovers out there. I see the skill. I see what's there. I'm not hating on you. But you are using the fact that Jon is going to retire before fighting him to strengthen your argument that Jon is acknowledging that he can't deal with him. And I'm sharing with you, he's already agreed to fight him. They didn't make the fight, but Jon agreed to fight him. And it's a very big deal that he does. Very big deal. If you're chasing legacy, which is currently held by St. Pierre. And you will have people that argue against George, and they will bring in Khabib. And the arguments are good. They're really strong. 29-0 covers a lot of bases. But George ultimately does win those arguments out. And many people don't know why. And the why is because he covered the spread 3 different ways. And if Jon wants legacy, it can't be about beating Stipe, and no matter how great Stipe was, right? I mean, we're not going to then go guard Mark Coleman or Don Fry. We just saw this, a recent example. Anthony Pettis just beat the greatest boxer to have ever boxed. Should we put Pettis as #1 in the world in boxing? I mean, do you see the difference, right? He got the win over Roy Jones, but it was at a different time. Do you see the difference? There's a difference here. Stipe hasn't fought in 2.5 years. By the time they get in the ring in November, it will be 2.5 years. It's a comeback fight. It's a comeback fight for a 41-year-old. And there will be metrics leading up to the fight to see what your interest is. We will start with the box office. Is it selling out? And the answer is yes. Yes, it will sell. But did it sell out? And did we have to do the walk-up? Did it sell out the day before? Did it sell out 1 hour after it went on sale and you had to turn to the black secondary market? Right? I mean, these are signs of what kind of a fight and the respect that you're going to have on a fight and what the legacy is going to say. It's not going to pass those tests. The fight with Sergi, if we're fighting for legacy, has to happen.